I did a bull vanish at the PCAM convention one time, original. It was very complicated. I used 2 different bowls. They didn't know it. I used 3 different tables, and I would pick up one and deposit one and move things around, and then I had a tearaway box. But when I put the lid on the newspaper box, I slid it on, and that hooked it onto the bowl. So when I picked it up, the bowl had no bottom, and you could run through with your hand and tear out the front and then hand it off to her, and then she'd go lay it down on another table and deposit it and come back and get all the rest. And it was complicated. I'd have to show you, but it didn't hook this night at Santa Barbara. And I picked it up and showed it again, waved my arms, went back, laid the top on and slid it to me, and it hooked. And I rushed through and I tore the paper out of all the sides of the paper tear, and the bowl was gone. Big one, full of water. And a Chinaman come up later, because I did the lid thing twice, and he said, "Have to lift the lid twice, make bowl go once?" And that broke Nancy up after the show, because he was very observing. I think this is very, very, very strange. It didn't happen to me, but Bob Andre, then he was Gertler, of course, we all entered contests in the PCAM, and I won 4 or 5 rabbit trophies, and Dick Zimmerman, I think, won about 6, and Bob won 4 or 5, 6, I don't know. But of Gertler's magical mind, this kid never won the PCAM trophy for originality. I thought that was quite interesting. He won for card manipulation and best original this, or with a deck of cards, or close-up, or whatever it was. I don't remember all the different categories. But it was when he was married to Alice. He won 2 that year. Alice won 1. I guess I won 2, he won 3, 5, yeah. And then Alice won 1 and Nancy won 1. We won 7 of the trophies, and but he has never won the trophy for originality. Another funny thing that happened when we did the Hollywood Palace TV show, everything was taken when we got there. We had to go from the Palace station where they filmed the thing, out to Bill Larson's house, pick up the act, because I had it there rehearsing, and then drive back to the station, and then all dressing rooms were filled up, so they set me up under Trigger, Roy Rogers' horse, and I put the case and opened it, and everything I did for that show was done right under Trigger. In Iran, on Sundays, we lived at Tehran in the Terraston Hotel, and it was close to town. It was on Lalizar and I don't know, Tiak de Jamshi or something, I forget now. But they had a Moulin Rouge theater which had English movies on Sunday afternoon. And so we'd come there and we'd stand outside and wait, and you couldn't go in until they raised the thing to sell tickets, and the same time they raised this curtain to sell tickets, they started the movie. So by the time everybody out there bought a ticket, why, the movie had, you know, the newsreel or the a little bit of the movie had been shown. And then it always broke, I thought. And every week we'd go Sunday see an English movie in American. And we asked her, "How's come the films always break?" "Oh, no, the films don't break. We wait for a man to bring the second reel over from another theater, and he has to do it on bicycle." So it was like it broke, and we had to sit there until he brought over the second reel, which they go up and put on, and then we'd get to going again. Very funny. We worked for the Shaw and Faradiba 3 or 4 times, 4 I guess. And the last time was in the Shaw's mother's palace, and we had her dressing room, or her bedroom for our dressing room. And after the show, we shot the pistol, you know, bang, bang, and there's Bianca. And went out and held her up, and everybody, oh, and you know, and Faradiba hold her arms out. I go give her to her, and I wheel the cart and everything back into the bedroom, and pretty soon Nancy said, "Where's Bianca?" I says, "Oh, I gave her to Faradiba." She says, "Well, you better just get right out there and get her. She may think you just produce them every night and give them away." I said, "Oh, she's educated, she knows." And I said, "Okay, I'll go get her." And I started to go out, and just as it did, there was a knock on the door, and I opened it, and it was Faradiba handing me Bianca and says, "Here, I think you want this back, don't you?" And I says, "Oh, yes, yes, I want her back." In Norway, we was in the Chat Noir, the Black Cat Theater, and we were, Nancy had this formal on with the fur around the bottom, and a balloon blew off at the table shelf, and every time she went to pick it up, the dress was in motion going forward, and it just kept scooting it across the stage until she went off stage. Stagehands picked it up, and she came back with it. And then the next show, I tied a big rope on the end of the balloon and curled it up and laid the balloon on it. And when she picked it up, here's this rope hanging on there, and she just about broke up. It was just a funny thing for her, but everybody else wondered, I suppose, what in the world are these nuts doing? But it was very funny. In England, I had Bianca in quarantine. She was in a case, and they had a great big sign that said, "This dog is in quarantine for rabies." And rabies was about 5 times bigger than she's in quarantine for. And I said, "That's not fair. They wouldn't touch her." So I had to jump the counter and go get the case and bring it over, and we had a big argument. And I said, "The next time I come to England, I'm going to get me a sandwich board. I'm going to put smallpox, great big letters on both sides of that thing, like it hang on both sides of me. And then in real fine letters, this man's been vaccinated for." And I said, "I'll clear this place out in about 5 minutes." "Oh, you can't do that. That wouldn't be fair." And then I showed him his sign, and I said, "You think that's fair? From over there, all they got over there in a suitcase is a box of rabies." We went around and around. Of course, I never did do that, but oh, I'd love to. In Germany, we did a fashion show one time. We was working Travelmunde, the casino in Travelmunde, and we did a modeling show in the afternoon, and they brought a box for the models to stand on and turn around, and they didn't have that at rehearsal. So when we got the act and we did the opening balloon and whatever else, why, Nancy backed up. She didn't see it, and it caused her to set down on this box. It was about a foot high or less, and the models come out and, you know, went through their gyrations standing on this box and then left. And they tried to sell the dresses and things. So Nancy sat there, and she was laughing so hard she could not get up. And everywhere I looked, she wasn't. And then pretty soon I looked down, and I think I said, "What are you doing down there?" But it was just one of those funny things. Opening night at the Scala in Barcelona, the Gala, Galley, they turn the lights out when you leave the rollout and you come back, and the curtain closes as you get there, and he stepped off of they had dancing waters on each side, and he missed the little walkway through the middle, fell into the dancing waters, laying on his back kicking, chickens floating out of his wardrobe, and laughing so hard he couldn't get up. And it was hilarious, but embarrassing, of course, for Galley. Yeah, when we worked at Weindorf in Dusseldorf, when Bianca was produced, why, I would set her down. We was in the middle of a dance floor with the audience all around us and the band in the back of us. And she would run to the kitchen and get steak every night. And she'd never done this before, but one night we have to carry everything through the audience, set it, and then leave, and then be introduced, and then come back out. I come out, the lid was flat, the sides were open, and everybody was laughing, and I looked around, and the gun's on the floor, and the newspaper's on the floor, and the boss has got Bianca back in the kitchen, holding him up, laughing. Everybody was laughing, of course. She realized that why should I wait 10 minutes or so to raise up the lid, of which she could do after first few shows. She found out all the lid comes open, I go get steak. So as soon as I set her down and left the dance floor and went out to come in, she was already in the kitchen. So of course we had to put a little hook on the back, and then when she lifted it, why, it didn't move. But it was funny and embarrassing. We was at the Linnamäki amusement park in Helsinki, and we went down, each one of us, with the orchestra, with the ballet. And I went down with the ballet, and I would toss the balloon in the air, and it would burst, and I'd have a dove and walk off to let them know who I was and take the everybody had to go through this, you know, doing their something from their act in the finale. And all through the act, later, reserved month, I guess, last couple weeks, every time I put a balloon in the tube, tie the knot and hand it to her and take a sword and push it through, they would go and get balloons off of my dressing room, blow them up, and when I'd put the sword in, they'd burst one in the orchestra pit. And it really shook me the first time, because I know I broke it, but it still blew it up. And they'd do that, and so I told them, all right, tonight I'm going to fill that balloon with water. And when I come down, I'm going to burst it. There won't be a dove, but water will come all over the orchestra. So here I came down the orchestra, down the thing with the girls on each side, you know, the ballet, and I looked at them and grinned, and the organ was leaning way over to one side away from me, and all the rest were huddled up in a sort of hunching along, playing, and I threw the balloon. They should have realized there couldn't be any water in it because it floated, you know, and when it come down, I burst it and had the dove. No, I had a sparkler, that's what it was, and I just did the sparkler from it. And one of the iron filings went up in the air and came down and lit right in the orchestra player's top of his head, very thick head of hair. And the whole band got to laughing because little puffs of puffs of smoke would come up out of his head. By the time I'd gotten off, nobody was playing but the piano player, as his head was puffing out smokes. And it was very funny, and everybody in the audience, the orchestra and everything, was just dying of laughing, you know, having a good time seeing this. My Fair Lady was a stripper, and we had a girl there that Myra Taylor, who had some connections with the commissary for the American soldiers that were there, and she bought pancake powder, and we all went over to her place, and we had pancakes one day, and that was nice. And My Fair Lady, she wanted to do them because she's from France. She never had pancakes, I guess. So she went down and bought some pancake powder on the market, you know. And Nancy bought hamburger. Boy, it was beautiful. But it made the reefer smell like fish. And we Myra Taylor over and says, how's come this smells? Oh, she said, what you bought is ground whale meat. That's not hamburger. It looked good like hamburger, so we threw that away. And that was funny. But then Fair Lady, she come in the next day and she says, that don't work quite like your pancakes. It's so thick I can't get the spoon out of it, and then all of a sudden it's so thin it's just water. So I put more pancake mix in, and then I can't get the spoon out, and then another few drops or water, and it's all just runny. So Myra says, I'll see you after the show tonight. I go, come to find out she had bought on the market, couldn't read it of course, powdered starch. So I was sort of glad we didn't all go to My Fair Lady's and try to eat pancakes. Whether they were thick or thin, I don't think they'd have been very good. At the Borsee in Zurich, I worried about Nancy getting back because she had to go down the kitchen and into the basement to get to the dressing room. And I was sort of surrounded, and I was worrying about people watching from the left and watching from the right, and I was doing the vanishing cage at that time. I hadn't put Bianca in yet. And so I went over and hid it from the guy on the left, and then I saw the guy on the right, he could see, so I went over and hid that. And pretty soon I says, oh, well, I'll just do it. And I put the sides down, I went forward, and I looked down, and I could see the spotlight on my white shirt. I never noticed that before. And so I raised it a little and looked, and in the excitement of everything, I forgot to put the front down. And so everybody saw everything vanish. And it was a fiasco for me that night. But I did it every night the rest of the month, so it was okay, I guess. In Sweden, in the Scotts Circus, there was the plate spinner, Eric Brenn, and he said, well, there was a midget clown called Kiki. I think it was Kiki Rembrandtsky or something like that. But anyway, Kiki, and he says, let's have some fun with Kiki. Okay, so we'd go over at night to the makeup tent, and we'd saw about a ½ inch off of the legs of his makeup stool. And we'd come back the next day, make up and work at the circus and everything. And we'd say, Kiki, how old are you? Oh, he'd say, I don't know, 56 or whatever it is. I says, you're getting shorter. He says, no, no. And then Eric Brenn would start on him. And then the next night we'd go over and we saw another ½ inch off his 3 legs, 4 legs, whatever it was, off the makeup stool. And we did that for a whole week. And first thing you know, we found him sitting on a pillow trying to see in his mirror that was hanging there. And then he had pillows and newspapers and the pillow on top of that. Finally, he realized he was getting shorter. He couldn't see in his makeup mirror, so he got so worried he went to the doctor. And the guy just, it was impossible, you know, at his age, but when he come back, why, we all told him what we was doing to him. And he was a nice guy. He quit the the circus. That was the Scotts Circus, yeah. And he got a job on the dispatch from the police department. So every time we went to Gothenburg, at the Park Avenue Hotel in Gothenburg, why, we'd go down there and see him, and we'd always see him the next 3 or 4 or 5 times we'd come there. He worked for the police and called them when they had to have an emergency thing. Oh, this is a lovely one. Myra Taylor at the orchestra in Oslo, at the Chat Noir. That's a big theater. And we had the show. It was a big show, and great acts. We had the world's greatest juggler at the time was Rudy Horn, and the Knockabout Act, the Three Getzies, and oh, Myra Taylor. Oh, we had so many good acts. Myra Taylor used to come out and sing good, and they had a gag with the orchestra that she'd say, let me see that music. They played the wrong tempo. And they'd give it to her, and she'd look at it, and she says, that's no waltz, and give it back to them. And the drummer sat high so he could see on the stage. The rest were down below the stage level, and they just played music, you know. But the drummer had to get the touches and the rolls and stuff, so he sat higher. And every night they'd do that. So we got the idea. Well, one night we run a rubber band through there and put a big washer on it, wound it all up, and she'd say, let me see that music. And they hand it to her, and when she'd open it, why, you go, you know, she'd want to throw it, but she would hang on to it and give it back to him. And the next night, why, we'd have something else. And up to one night, it was near the end, why, we went down and got a catnip mouse, and we put a hole in the back heavy folder and tied a string to the front heavy folder, run it through the hole, 2 holes, I guess, or come around the back, maybe 2 holes, I don't remember, and then down to the mouse. So when she took this, she opened it, and opened it caused the mouse to run up the page to the bottom outside corner. And she screamed and throwed that thing at the drummer. She says, "Let me see that music." And then she always says, "That's not a waltz." She didn't get to say nothing. She screamed. She took her wig off. I threw it at the drummer, and the music went out of nowhere, and everybody was just dying laughing with her. So the very last night, Rudy Horn, juggling, he come back, he said, I laughed all the way through the act, I missed everything, I was terrible tonight. And the 3 Getsies, they couldn't do the act, they walked off. And everybody that was in the show, and My Fair Lady, she even got stuck in the seat. It was one of those things that the seat came out, and she bent it some way or twisted it, and it went down, and she went down, and then she couldn't get out. And oh, it was just a fiasco, and everybody was laughing and laughing, and I said, "What's wrong?" And they said, "You'll see when you go out there." And so I went out, and I looked, and the orchestra was one that came up from below, and you could only see about the waist of them. And I walked out there, I couldn't believe it. There I was in tuxedos, white shirts, bow ties, and stark naked. Not anything on but a coat and a shirt and tie. And of course they separated the coat and pulled up the shirt, and they was all sitting there naked. Everybody, except the drummer, because he sits higher and then the audience can see him, but they can only see a third of a guy in the pit from the audience. And when Myra Taylor came out, she says, "I'm not going to ask for that music tonight. I don't know what's going to happen." And she looked at that thing, and she said, "Oh." And she threw the music at him, took her wig off, throwed that at him, and stomped off, laughing, of course. And that was the last act on the show and the last night of the show. But we had that kind of fun a lot of places. Didn't try to ruin their act, but you know, things happened that just can't believe some of the things that we've had happen. You know, we used to get our mail at the American Express in any country. Because you just put Ed Keener, American Express, Gothenburg, Sweden, and it goes there, and I come down and pick it up. And but there wasn't an American Express in Gothenburg, only in Stockholm. And I had it sent to American Express in Gothenburg. And it kept coming to the hotel. And I don't know how they got that, but I was in the Park Avenue Hotel in Gothenburg, and all my mail kept coming there. So somebody must have checked it out to find out who I was and where I was at. And anyway, that's the only place. All the rest of the towns or cities or anything that I went to, I got it from the American Express, and those, of course, they sent it to the agent, or I knew in advance and told them where I was going to be for 6 months or something. But that was always a puzzle for me, how they got that. We had Pearl Bailey in the show one time, and we had the big orchestra there and a few acts, and this guy on trombone, he kept interrupting her rehearsal, and he says, "I've got no music." She says, "That's all right." And pretty soon they'd play, and pretty soon he'd stand and holler and wave, and he'd say, I have no music, Miss Bailey." And he did this 3 or 4 times, and even the leader said, "Don't worry about it." And so pretty soon she asked the leader, says, "Give me a sheet of music." And he handed her a sheet of music. Wasn't any notes on it, it's just a sheet of music. And she wrote "Tacit Sheet." Well, you know that means you don't play right there. She handed him the whole thing. There's your music. Went back and rehearsed some more. It was so funny to see that poor idiot. Oh my gosh, we was in the King's Theatre in Edinburgh, and there was a lot of good acts in there. We was in there with David Nixon, magician, and then we stayed another time. We was there another time with the Bachelors, a singing group of boys. But anyway, Rob Murray was a juggler, very funny. He's dead now, but we had the overture. Everybody has a call box in their dressing room, and it says 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it says whatever it is, and then the overture's played and you can hear it through your dressing rooms. And we did the first night, all sat around and talked, went home, and I got there and I was with Ula and Barbara, Bicycle Act, which was first. We stopped by and was talking to them, sitting in their dressing room. Plenty of time, and all of a sudden we heard the overture. No makeup, no costumes on, no nothing. And there was 4 or 5 acts in there, and we took off running in every direction. And everybody was cussing and hollering and screaming. And come to find out, Rob Murray, the juggler, had taped it the night before, and he come half an hour or 45 minutes before showtime and put that thing on and run it, the overture. And we didn't check with the time or nothing. Common sense would have told you we didn't get there till an hour and a half maybe before the show, and in 20 minutes, why, it was overture time. What? All we did was run, and poor guy, Rob almost got fired over that. That was at the King's in Edinburgh, Scotland, and that shook everybody up. Nanci was just learning German, and there's a word of shit and shoot, which are quite the same. They're schießen and scheißen. Schießen is shoot, and then scheißen. And she was trying to make the orchestra with our music, you know, tell them what we did and everything. And she says, "Mein man, well, scheißen the Luftballon into the Seidentuch, which is a silk, will shoot the Seidentuch into the Luftballon." And that meant I was going to shit it in there. And they cracked up and they said, "We got to see this act." And she made a lot of boo-boos like that, but I'd sometime get her down and she can tell you some she made really bad. But with such good people, they just laughed, of course. It's funny to be on the train or in a plane and have the birds that they don't know you got either up high over your head or someplace in the plane under your seat or someplace, and you hear this and everybody's looking around. Of course, I'm looking around too, like, where is that? I'm 30,000 feet in the air and I hear birds. And it's funny at the time to see the reaction of the people. It's not funny to tell you probably, but Germany, Opel station wagon. Oh yeah, this was very funny. They keep their cars polished and shined and no dents and everything. Bumpers are an ornament. They're not for bumping. They're there for beauty. And my station wagon, I had an Opel, and the back window on the station wagon was dirty with like muddy water, and you couldn't see out it. And I had it someplace, and I went to put the baggage into the back, and somebody had taken their finger and written a message in the dirt. They wrote, "Don't wash it, plant something." And if you knew the Germans, why, you'd know they spit and polish on everything. Samson used to have slits all over his clothes where he'd taken Rappy's body with an elastic bandage, you know, big long thing, and he looked like a mummy except for his hands and his neck and head and all around. And then he'd get dressed and he'd stick feather bouquets and bags of fruit that collapsed and tables that folded up into these bandages, and he'd have them all over him. And he'd have slits all over his suit and every place to just pull them out and produce them. They'd unfold. And wonderful act. And we was working in a tent in Vienna for the newspaper, I think it was, on the outside, and it was full every night. And so one night Samson put his clothes in to have them dry cleaned. I guess we all did. We got them back. Might have been opening night, I don't know, but he went and put all the tape on him, and that gets tighter as the hour goes along, you know. And he loaded all the things into him, so then he started to get dressed, and the dry cleaning must have thought, poor boy, and they went and sewed up all these openings. And he couldn't work that night. He had to sit there and cut them all open, all over the thing, down his legs and down his arms and in his coat and in the tails, and oh, it was a mess for him. But you couldn't do anything but laugh when, when he started panicking. All of his openings to steal feather bouquets and fruits bags and flowers and tables, and everything was all sewed up. It was really funny. I went to Spain the first time I was down there. I went to gasoline. I had a Mercedes, and they have gasolina and gasolino. They're all spelled the same, except one's got an A at the end of it and one's got an O at the end of it. And I thought it was super and cheap, so I had them put the cheap one in, and that was now I can't even think of the word. Not benzene or gasoline, but the other one, you know. And of course it ruined everything before I got to where I was going, and I had to stop and have all new rubber put in and everything, because old chintzy tightwad Keener didn't want to put the good stuff in. I put that bloody truck stuff in. At the Weindorf, yeah, Bianca, there's a guy come up to me and he says, I'd like to have you for a little television show. I says, fine. And I says, which, do you want the whole act or just certain parts of it? Oh, I don't want that at all. He says, I only want the dog. He was a veterinarian, and Bianca did finger control, like people say things, sit and stay and go or come, or well, I could do it with the fingers and she'd do it. And he says, I just want the dog in my vet show. So I said, oh, okay. And I brought her down, and I did a few things down and jumped through the arms, and you know, the heel and run around you and sit and stay and come, and all with fingers signs. And he wrote a contract, and I signed it and put her footprint on it, and got 1,000 shillings. It's not much money. And then I put it in the scrapbook, and I inked her foot and put the footprint in the scrapbook, and her check is in there, and a photocopy, I hope. Maybe I lost 1,000, I don't know. But it was funny, you know, for us. We had a finale, and somebody had came backstage and was standing down there, and I was waiting to go out in the finale of the Get Gay show at the hotel in, well, anyway, in Sweden, at the Park Avenue Hotel. And I saw pretty soon they had the sparklers, the Roman candles were shooting, and I was talking to this guy backstage, and I thought I should be out there when those are going. And what had happened, Eric Brin saw me talking to this other party, and when they announced me, well, he went out and took a bow and came back. Then when he announced Eric Brand, he went out and took a bow and he came back. And Get Gay just about flew her mind and then at the end of the thing I was out there, but she got on me and I explained to her, but she always hired me back because I was a time act. You get a magician talks, you don't know when he's going to end. You get a comedian talking, you don't know when he's going to end. You get a singer, Spanish, they encore, 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 but I am a time act, and they knew to the second how long I'd be there, so she had me in every time she came to the Park Avenue Hotel. But boy, I goofed it that time. We was driving to Munich one time in a snowstorm, and some truck broke a shield, made a hole in it, and it was sort of coming in. We had a clear balloon, not a balloon, an umbrella, and we chipped it out to make it big enough I could slide the umbrella through there and then open it, and the open was on the outside, and it was clear so I could see through it. And we were driving down the Autobahn in a snowstorm with an umbrella sticking out the front window, and we thought everybody must have thought we was crazy, but it kept the snow off of us. Oh yeah, and in Denmark there was a puppeteer named Martin Granger, and he had a big puppet. I mean, it was big. It was probably, 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 feet high, and his name was Doobie. And he played the bass, fiddle, and he would tune that thing. And Doobie would tune it, and Martin would do it by working the strings, and so went out one night and he got ready to do the act, and he started to tune it, and nothing worked. And they had to cancel it and let him come back, and he found out one of the ballet had knocked Doobie over, and they'd broke the strings, and they didn't tell Martin Granger. And he found out what girl it was, and he brought her over there in front of Doobie, made her get down on her knees and beg for herself, please forgive me for knocking you over and not telling Martin. And boy, it was just like a child to him, but it had to be, and he did it. Oh yeah, we was at Scheveningen in Holland, and we was at the Copacabana with the Riviera chips. There was a big one called Mario and a little one called Bubo. And the Bubo was in love with Nancy. He couldn't hardly get him off of her to her go work, and when she'd come back in, he'd get in there and he'd just hug her. But Mario was as big as me almost. He was a big chimp. And he used to come over and drag his stool over by where I had all my props, and he'd sit there and cross his legs and put his thumb in his nose or up his mouth or something and watch me. And I would turn my back to him and I'd hide the gimmicks. And I did this for 1 or 2 nights. And then all of a sudden one night I thought, Keener, you're cracking up. Here you're hiding your secret gimmicks from a bloody chimpanzee, and I get around so I'm standing so he can't see what I'm doing. And I thought, man, I've had it. I was staying in a place called the Port d'Or, and it was raining, and it leaked. It was raining, which helped, but the water got shut off, and then we had the faucet on in the sink in the room. And we went to work, and then when they fixed it, they put it back on. I had clothes she was washing in the sink, and of course when it come on, it just filled and run all over the floor, and it went down to the stripper below, and Lova Baumkiss was her name, and she called them, and they said, oh, it's probably been leaking all the way through. And when I come out and found it, I let the clothes out and it all run down the sink, of course, and everybody thought it was all from the rain, but it was from me having clothes in the sink where it couldn't drain, and it was shut off, and I forgot to shut the faucet off, and then when it come on, it filled the sink and then went on the floor and then went clear through everything and dripped on the Lova Baumkiss's bedroom, and oh, it was a mess. Oh, in Phoenix, we got, in '61, we did the convention of PCAM, and I have, Nancy was going to help, because John didn't want to, Irene was married to John then, and he wanted Nancy to do the dizzy limits, you know, the net, and she did it and was up there, and about 20 minutes after the show was over, why, we heard this little voice says, can I come down now? And we'd forgot about her being up there and left her up there for about 20 minutes while we was packing. Crazy, crazy people. Pete and Evelyn Hoven was a pantomime thing with records, you know. And we was going to the movie one afternoon. There was an old guy, couldn't play violin at all, but he stood in front of that movie house and had a cup hanging on it, and he was sawing that thing. I wonder why he didn't cut it in two, but he was sawing away, doing the best he could. And old Pete nudged me, and Pete run up there and got right by the side of him and started doing a soft shoe. And I went and gave him, I don't know, 10 krona or something to Pete. And Pete turned around, ran up, and bought a ticket to the movie. And that guy, you have to see it. It's not funny to tell you. He was looking at us and sawing, and then as Pete left with the money, he turned and watched him and still sawing and playing music and watched him buy that ticket. And we were standing out there on the curb like, and very soon he came back, and that guy followed Pete all the way and never missed a note. And I mean, it was so funny. But then Pete tipped him, of course, gave him whatever it was for his effort there. But funny things. We had a drummer who had the orchestras. His name was Booger D. And he kept telling this guy he's playing the wrong note. He says, "You're playing A instead of B. I want B, B, B. Let's take it from the top again." And sure enough, he wasn't playing it. So Booger D stopped him. This was in Germany, and said, listen, don't play B. Don't play A. B, 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 like in potato." And it broke us all up. Oh yeah, I was working the German military at Frankfurt, the Rhine-Main, and they had me, and we was all ready to go on, and they said, and the belly dancer didn't show up tonight, and everybody was, "Ooh," and it was for GIs, of course, and said, "But we have a magician," and everyone went, "Boo." And they said, "And there is a free buffet at the back of the room." When I came out, there wasn't one person out there. The belly dancer had killed him. They didn't want a magician and the free buffet. So I just went ahead and did the act to nothing. It was quite funny. There's a lot of funny things happened in the military. Oh yeah, I did the paper tear. And when I always get that single sheet and look at it, well, there happened to be a great big clock there on that little piece. And I put it in the other hand so they could see it. And then I took it and put it in the right hand and then checked it against my watch. And it got a great laugh. So I went down and had a whole bunch of those little corners made, figured out where they was to come out to there, and I glued them on several paper tears, so no matter which one I had, and I could tear them up, and the single one would always be that one with the clock on it. I must have had 50 of those things made, and I did it, never got a snicker any other time. I had to throw them all away. You know, it's once in a lifetime funny happening. We lived with Lou Lane, the stage manager at Churchill's, and he had a dog there, and a little Yorkie, and he used to bring home food for Yorkie from Churchill's, and then they'd all go to bed, and Bianca'd want to get up, and she'd run down and the bowl would be empty. Sometimes there'd be food, she'd eat it, and so after a little bit, a month of that, we was there 6, 7 months, but she wouldn't go down anymore. She'd run down, look over the balcony, and see if there was any food in the bowl, and then she'd go down. If there wasn't any food in the bowl, she'd go back to bed. Oh, she was so smart. Oh yeah, he had a little Mini, and anytime it rained, he'd run out and poured soap flakes all over this Mini. And then it'd stop raining, and he'd have this stuff all gummy all over his car, and he'd have to pay to have somebody wash it off. And another time there was a juggler in Switzerland with us called Foodie. He was from Hungary, I think, I don't know, but he was one of those countries. And he was over here to work with Circus, you know, Ringling Brothers down in Florida, and they said, Foodie, fix the coffee. So he dumped all his coffee in and cooked it, and everybody thought, whew, that's strong. He made it too strong. But Foodie said, oh God, look at these Americans. He just got here. He says, they're clever. They figured a way to get rid of all the coffee grounds. They'd say, make some more coffee, but don't make it quite as strong. And he'd make it, and yep, no coffee grounds, and they still complained a little. But they were smart, these Americans. He was like out of the jungle, you know. He didn't know nothing from those foreign countries that he was in. But the thing he found out was that he was making it with instant coffee, and he was pouring in a whole lot, and then it all disappeared, and he thought, boy, we're smart. We found a way to get rid of the coffee grounds. Oh, Ivan Ditmars with Oliver Berliner and Milt Larson, they put on the It's Magic things. And when we had Blackstone as the star, we went to the Hollywood Pasadena Civic Auditorium. And there you had to have a 12 or 18 piece orchestra. So they got Ivan Ditmars. But he wanted too much money, so Milt Larson says, well, we can't afford that. So he says, okay, I want 12 or whatever it was. I got 12 or 18 piece orchestra. I want 12 or 18 oboe players. And they scoured all over, and they couldn't find 12 or 18 oboe players. It was free, and it could stay there for a week. And I used to run them a week. And so then if you can't furnish me with the orchestra I want, then I'll just use any old orchestra. And he used Ivan Ditmars and the one he wanted in the first place. But that was smart of Milt and Oliver Berliner. They wouldn't allow girls to go topless in the big clubs like Scala and all those. And they had to wear a big G-string and bras and everything. But when Franco died, we were there at the Scala, and they closed for 3 days, and when they opened topless and a little bitty G-string like other countries. But it was nice to not see any nudity in a Vegas type show. And then 3 days after Franco died, why, it was Vegas all over again. I was at the Moulin Rouge, and Galley was there, and he told us meet him in that restaurant next door. So I did after the show. And we were sitting there talking and everything, and a couple of guys came in, and Galley says, oh, I want you to meet the chef from the Moulin Rouge. I says, okay. He took me over, and he says, this is so-and-so, and this is so-and-so. This is a fine act, Ed Keener. He's working at Bobino's, and this and this. And I says, glad to meet you. And I sit down, and I wondered why he would say, I want you to meet the chef of the Moulin Rouge. But you see, the chef is the owners. They're the boss. I thought he was a cook or something. And of course that killed me anything, but I just brushed them off. It was the Clerical brothers, and they own the Moulin Rouge, and so that blew my chances. Father Rupert Hanner, oh well, he gambled, you know, all those places for make the music instruments and clothes for the band at the Indian school, and woman, he was gambling up there when the convention was in Reno. He was over in Sparks, and the woman says, are you winning, sir? And he says, no. She says, do you know why? He says, no, why? She says, you're sinning, Father. She recognized him. Oh, Chuck Kirkham used to work PCAM convention, and he did the Thurston sawing. And I'll give $10,000 to anyone who can prove I used 2 girls in this illusion. And the guy that wrote all the big books on Aikido, Dr. something, he was right behind me, and he leaned forward. He says, "Isn't that a little risky?" I said, "Not really." I said, "He's got his son in the bottom with his bare feet." And so he was safe in saying that anybody could prove he was using two ladies, why, $10,000. But I thought that was clever. We had a girl that was a stripper, and we was working a high fish bar in Zurich down at the end of the Niederdorfer Strasse. And she used to come in with some of the most darling little clothes. And she'd say, "Yeah, I got that down there at the Buddy Q, just around the corner." Buddy Q? Don't know that one. And we'd go looking for it, couldn't find it. And again, she'd come all decked out with something cute. And we says, "Well, where is this Buddy Q?" And she says, "Just down around the corner." So when you get off tonight, let's go down and look at it. Maybe Nancy can buy something down there too. Went down there. It wasn't Buddy Q, it was Boutique. B-O-U-T-I-Q-U-E, so it was Buddy Q, all right. We thought that was quite hilarious. Iran, golly, oh yeah, we was together. We had 4 magicians in the same show in Tehran. We had Nairuddin and Gali and myself and Brahma. And they put us all one after the other. And the ballets, they put all the ballets one after the other. And the singings, one after the other. And the acrobats, one after the other. I don't know. They're strange. But he went out to the bazaar to buy oranges. And he buys, maybe a bag of 100 of them, or 50 or 20, I don't know. So he got all the big oranges. And he said, "Let me see these oranges." And he looked at them and he says, "Yeah, give me, give me 20 of them or something, you know." And then he put his thumb in the end and started peeling it and took it, and there was 100 reals inside of that one, which he does in the show, you know. And he says, "Look at that." And he showed it to us and folded up and put it in his pocket. And says, "Give me another 50 of those oranges." And she put the curtain down, run around in front where we was at, and said, "These oranges are for sale." We could just see her tearing into all them oranges and ruin them. But he did that beautifully. Of course, it's part of his act. In TV, when they ask someone to cut, that'll be a live act. And the Sons of Pioneers, when we was with Roy Rogers, Dale Evans, and Kate Smith on the Hollywood Palace, they told Nancy, "If you can, get your act taped, and then they'll never cut it. They'll cut only the live acts, because they cut the paper tear out of mine because it was running too long." Another time in Switzerland, in a nightclub there, the dog act, and the guy come up and he says, "You know, we're running too long tonight. Can you cut the dog act a little?" Says, "Sure." Says, "You just go over there and tell that dog which part of his act you want him to cut out, and he'll do it." And I thought, well, that's a nice way of telling him off. But you can't, an animal that's trained to do one right after the other, you can't say, "Hey, we're going to leave this out tonight." You know, it's just not done. We was in England at Churchill's, and after we worked, why, Bianca'd get in her case and curl up under the costumes and go to sleep. But she knew the music because we was there 6 months, seven different times, 6 months at a time. And when they got to this certain music, in the finale, Nancy never took them, but I always went out with Bianca, and they'd say the Keeners. And I'd be standing there watching out of the dressing room, and she'd come over and paw on my leg. And I knew it was time, and I'd pick her up and hold her, and then pretty soon I'd go out and take a bow. But she knew by the music when she was supposed to go take a bow, and I could tell you a lot of tales about that little girl, but she was something else. Iran, Rudis dancer. Oh yeah, the Rudis dancers. The ballet, they tried to leave. They were all teenagers, and Pavis, he wouldn't let them go until he'd slept with all of them. And so I took the luggage down one time and standing there by it, and they said, "What are you doing?" And I says, "Well, as soon as the ballet gets here, well, we're going to get a taxi." And they're, "No, you can't do that." And they took it away from me and made him work. And Taki Bengali, I told him, and he says, "Oh, when do you want them out of here?" I said, "Well, they want to leave now. They got other contracts, and they're only teenagers, you know, and they're from Australia, and they're good acrobats." And I said, "They're ready to go anytime." He says, "Okay, I'll have them out here tomorrow." I said, "Yeah, they want to go to England." So I never thought anything about it. I went down the next day. We was living up above the club, and there they were, all backed up with their luggage out there by the front door, waiting for taxis or buses or something. And I thought, golly, how do you do that? And next time I saw Taki, I says, "Taki, how'd you get those girls out of there so quick like that?" He says, "No problem. Pavis has been trying to get them into his room, you know, all the time they're here." But I told him, "Well, you can't do that. They're all lesbians." And then the old man Hajazi, who owned the place, said, "Get rid of them, get rid of them." They'd been there about 6 months, you know, and they wanted to move on. And got them out the next day. And that was just, you know, using your head. Nanci used to go from the terrace in Zurich, and she'd walk Bianca maybe between shows or something in the parking, which was all around it. And some couple of guys would come up and proposition her, and how much for two and everything. She said, "Well, I'm just, you know, walking the dog." She says, "I got a customer, and I got to go back to him, but maybe around 10 o'clock. And they says, "Yeah, we'll be here." And no trouble, see. But if you said, "Well, what are you talking about? You swing at them or cuss them out or run away from them?" Well, they go berserk. But if you say, "I got a customer and I can't do it right now," why, they understand that. And so no problems, you know. And the same, somebody pinched her in Italy as she walks down the street. They pat her on the butt or pinch her, and she said, "Oh, thank you." And there's no problem. And you can't get mad and throw a tizzy. Oh yeah, Cortez. You work in Spain, and they used to tell me there's a thing back on the back. It's 11 or 12 or 16 or something. I used to know, but I don't now. That says in Spanish that if Cortez brings you to the Scala or to the Florida Park, which he did there, any time while you're in Spain that you get any work from another agent or yourself, he gets 10%. You see, and I says, "Well, that's not fair." And he says, "Well, if I bring you down here and somebody sees you and books you, another agent, I think I should have 10% for bringing you down, and you're extending your work through another man who will get 10%, and that's just the way we do it down here." And I says, "Well, that's all right with me. If I book it myself, or another agent books it, then I must request you to do one thing." And I said, "When you book me and bring me down here, as long as I'm in this country, you don't book another magician." "Well, I book lots of magicians." And so I said, "Well, that's very possible, but I work with a lot of agents. And if you want me to sign this, that you get 10% of no matter who brings me into this place, why, then when I'm here, I don't book any other magicians." And finally we had an agreement that we'd scratch everything and everything would work all right. We had a lot of trouble in Switzerland. You can only work 6 months. You got to go to police and health department, have x-rays of your chest and do everything. And so there's a lot of agents that'll book you for a year. And I think, well, that sounds fishy. And but they're clever and it's sensible. They book you on my birthday, just happened to be, book you on June the 1st. So you have 6 months of 1 year, and then you stay the other 6 months, and that's 6 months of another year. So if you go in on 6 months or on June the 1st, you can work a year, and that's just clever business. There are 5 words, and all start with D, that you have to abide by. If you aren't interested enough to become a magician or any business, that you cannot follow these 5 words, you ain't gonna make it. And every one of them starts with D. Strange, isn't it? You have to have determination, you have to have desire, you have to have dedication, you have to have a drive, and you have to have devotion. And if you don't have those, you're not going to make a salesman or a speaker or a magician or a piano player or anything else. Your life is got to be all of those 5 things.